Lauren Kimball for ANI 150, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the next stage of the crate. In our last tutorial, we went ahead and cleaned up our outliner. We deactivated this crate corner and put it away. We took the low poly crate and all of its individual pieces, put them in a group, and then stuck them in a layer. And we took a low poly version of that same crate and combined it, deleted its history, and named it low poly crate. So our scene is now ready to move on to the high poly version. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just deactivate my low poly, and I'm going to turn on my crate separated, and I'm going to go up here and I'm going to grab the group that has that, and I'm going to go Command D, and that's going to duplicate it in my outliner. With this second group selected, I'm going to go over here to my display layers and just create a layer out of the mesh I have selected. Okay, so I've got this empty layer now. I'm going to go ahead and call it High Crate Separated. I just realized I think I'm spelling separated wrong. Separated? Oh well. Sorry, I'm a terrible speller. That's why I went into art. Alright, so crate group 1, I'm going to go ahead and call it High Crate Group. I'm going to go over here and turn off my low poly and turn off my crate separated, so only thing I should have is High Crate Separated. And of this, I'm going to go ahead and grab the main crate. Oops. And then I'm going to hold down Shift and marquee select all the other pieces. And I'm going to go ahead and temporarily put them in a layer. For now, I'll just call it Pieces. It's a temporary layer. We're not going to use it forever, but that way I can just isolate my crate for right now. Okay, so the idea for building the high poly mesh is to basically add edge loops to our low poly so that when we smooth it, so smooth preview on your keyboard is 3, it doesn't look like it melted in the microwave. So I could just go through and add edge loops willy-nilly, but it's easier to control a smaller object than this big old crate. So even though we just got done combining and laying out the UVs on our low poly, for this we're going to chop it up again. So I'm going to go click on my mesh, shift right click, and I'm going to go to the Insert Edge Loop tool, option box, reset my tool, multiple edge loops, set the equal multiplier to 1, and close out of that. Then I'll just click in the middle and do that again over here. And that will allow me to chop up my mesh cleanly. Now remember, to do this step, it's really important that your crate is in the dead center of your grid. In this case, we modeled it that way, so unless you accidentally budged your crate, this should be the case. Great way to double check is to look in the top view, and you can zoom in, and those edge loops you added should be indistinguishable from the crosshairs that make up the middle of the grid. Alright, I'm going to right click and select faces, and I'm going to delete all the back faces that made up the back end of the trunk, and then grab these, or crate, and now I'm left with that 1/4 corner. Doesn't really matter which one you choose. And then I'm going to go press F8 to put it back in object mode. Alright, and my next step is to start adding edge loops. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my grid for now because I don't need it. I'm going to double click on my edge loop tool because it was the last tool I used. It's right here, still kind of sitting in my toolbar, but if it's not showing up for you, just shift right click and select edge loops. I'm going to reset the tool because I don't want it to just be creating things equally. And I'm going to use a little technique here that in Maya used to be called the smooth proxy tool, but they changed it. It's now instancing with the mirror tool. So what I'm going to do is, well, first let me explain. While I'm adding edge loops, like let's just say I started adding edge loops to turn this blob into something a little bit more resembling of a crate, or an angular crate, every time I add an edge loop and I press 3, you know, it's trying to show me both the smooth view and the poly view that I'm working in, just by virtue of working in the edge loop tool. So that can be distracting. It means every time I want to look at what I did, I have to go into object mode and press 3 just to see how it's, you know, coming out. Let me turn off the wireframe because wireframe's getting distracting too. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to hold down my, shift right click, and I'm going to go down to mirror option, just like I was, you know, preparing to mirror over and combine my crate again. I'm going to reset the settings just in case, you know, your settings are reset. I always turn off cut geometry. This time, instead of going to copy, which is what we typically do with mirroring, I'm going to change it to instant, or instance. Mirror axis position world is still good. It looks like it's going to want to mirror on the x-axis, so that works, and it's going to want to mirror on the positive. So if this box is activated, it looks like I want to mirror on the side where the X is pointed, so that means it's in the positive area according to my little compass down here. And I'm going to go click mirror. And it looks just like I do when I mirror geometry. There doesn't seem to be any distinguishable characteristic of it until we get into modeling. See, if this were just a copy as an output of the mirror option, then anything I did to this side would not be applied to this side. However, it's an instance. So if I right-click on a vertex and I move it, it's going to move it on the other side. And if I smooth my mesh, I can see very clearly how it's affected on the other side without having to worry about wireframes. So I'm going to go back into object mode, and I'm going to start adding edge loops. I want that corner to be nice and defined, so let's see how that's coming. Yeah, it looks good. Let's go down here and reinforce this corner. Alright, there we are. Press 3. Yeah, it's starting to look good. I think I'm going to go ahead and grab this edge here. I'm going to shift right click and go to slide edge tool, because I think I want this to be a little closer. And I'll do the same here. Okay. Yeah, that's a sharper edge. I like that. I'm going to do the same down here. Just double click this edge loop, press G because it's the last tool I used, and just bring that in a little closer. Looking. Yeah, looks pretty good. Let's just work our way up on the horizontal edge loops, and we'll work on the vertical ones later. Alright, so I've got my tool selected. Let me make sure I've got, ooh, no, I don't want that. Object mode, right click, shift right click, insert edge loop. Alright, so let's go ahead and add some geometry around there. Press 3. Oh, that looks good. Okay. Moving up. I think it's helpful to knock out the horizontal edge loops first and then work your way around the vertical. That way you can have like a start to an end and then, you know, start to end. Kind of make sure you don't miss any surfaces. Alright. The lip of the crate, that's important. Oops. Onto this. Okay. Maybe add an edge loop inside the lip of the crate. And here too. Maybe up here. See how that's looking. Yeah, that's looking really nice. Good. Cool, cool. Alright, see if there needs to be any other edge loops. Go in this direction. Yeah, I think right here. this corner too. Now this tends to dip down right here because of the way the mesh is laid out. Let's make sure it stays sharp. Yeah, it doesn't matter that it dips. It looks pretty good. I think the outcome looks nice. Maybe it's a little sharper around the end. Oh, I see. Yeah, I might slide that edge down just a little bit. Did I accidentally create two edges? Oh, I think that's what happened. There. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. That's why that edge was so sharp. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And then on this side. Nope, not yet. Still working these horizontal edge loops. And don't worry about this far off edge here, because remember, we're going to end up deleting that in the long run. All right, let's see how that is looking so far. Cool. Yeah. Perfect. All right, let's start addressing. Oh, cool. It kind of inadvertently addressed some of these faces. I also want one here, and here, and here. Because I like that sharp angle on the corner. Ooh. Some of this looks really tessellated. That's okay, we only want it for its normals. Alright, let's press 3. Okay. Let's get in here and work some of these corners. Remember, you don't have to worry about this because this is going to be deleted. Yeah. Okay then. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Still has that sharp angular appeal, but softer, kind of like it's got a soft bevel. All right, so what I want to do next is there's a couple things I could do here. One is I could grab these and I could just delete history, and when I delete history, it should, oh, it doesn't work that way anymore. This tool used to be something called the smooth proxy, and back when it was a smooth proxy, you could just delete history and it would become a regular mirror. I'm just going to delete it altogether. See if there was, yeah, there's no extra pieces left. And then I'm going to shift right click and mirror this properly with the copy tool over on the X. I do not want to merge border vertices, do not merge borders, but it can combine with the original. There we go. And now this time I want it to go on the z-axis. Apply. There we go. All right, next step is to shift right click, grab those vertices. I'm going to shift right click, and you notice some of these edge loops come really close together. I'm going to go ahead and make sure my threshold is set to 001 because I don't want any of those merging unexpectedly and then causing unintended n-gons. So I'm going to go ahead and merge. When I'm done, it should be really easy to grab these edge loops here. Shift right click, delete edge, very important. I think we've stressed that enough in these tutorials, how important it is to delete edge loops appropriately. So it should show it selecting all the way around, very important. Shift right click, delete edge. And then we can grab our object and we can delete its history. So under polygon modeling, freeze transformations, delete history, and center pivot, delete history, freeze transformation. And if I press 3, this is what it's going to look like previewed, smooth. And it's ready to go. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and save because this was some significant steps. Go and call it crate 20 high poly. Okay. Alright, so the next step, I'm going to turn off my high poly crate separated layer and activate the pieces. Why are the pieces not showing up? I'm not in view select mode. Oh, I guess I never added them to the layer. Oh, I did? Oh, they're still in that layer. That's weird. Alright, so I'm going to select the objects in this layer, and for some reason they are also still showing as being connected to this layer. If this shouldn't happen, but if it does happen to you, just click on the layer those pieces are still tied to, right click, and remove selected objects. And now when I turn it off, it ignores it anyway. Because why not? That's so weird. Okay, let's try that again. Shift, grab all those objects. I definitely have them. Right click, remove select objects. Really? Okay, let's do it this way. I'm going to just delete these two layers. Grab this box, create a new layer. Oh, right. They don't like spaces. High poly crate. And then shift select everything else. Add it to a new layer. Pieces. Haha. Finally got the better of it. Okay. So in the low poly, we're pretty much done with these things once we duplicated them and packed their UVs, but with the same workflow in mind, we're going to go ahead and delete all these wonderful duplicates and mirrors from the low poly. Because once we get the high poly going, it's going to be important to reduplicate so that we don't have to keep, adding edge loops to every single little piece. So I'm going to pick this up in the next tutorial, so these tutorials aren't so savagely long.